Verdict: we, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all, four-person.
It was that verdict that once again thrust race relations in America into the spotlight. George Zimmerman was acquitted after shooting and killing 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in February of 2012. Just hours after the acquittal was announced, San Francisco organizer Alicia Garza posted to Facebook how she was feeling, writing, quote, "Young black boys in this country are not safe. Black men in this country are not safe. This verdict will create many more George Zimmermans. Black people, I love you, I love us, our lives matter." Her friend and fellow organizer Patrisse Cullors replied to the post with the hashtag Black Lives Matter, and within days it was trending on Twitter and had become a rallying cry. Earlier, I spoke with Garza about the movement and her new book. Alicia Garza, co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, joins me now from Oakland, California. She details everything that led to the creation of the movement in her new book entitled The Purpose of Power: How We Come Together When We Fall Apart, which hits bookshelves today. Alicia, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So in your book, you talk about how movement requires shifting people from spectators to strategists. How did you transition the hashtag Black Lives Matter into an all-out movement, which literally has become an international movement?
Well, one of the things I talk about in the book is that hashtags don't start movements, people do. And movements are really what happens when people come together when we've fallen apart. I like to say that movements are about moving more power into the hands of more people, and that's what we've been doing. You know, this book for me is not really the story about Black Lives Matter. It's the story of lessons that I've learned over 20 years of organizing, BLM being a part of that. And it's really a book for people who want to figure out how to get started or maybe need another kickstart to get going again.
And in Chapter 9, you speak about unity and solidarity. You take a very deep dive into this topic. I'm going to quote something you write. If Black people come together to affirm one another's humanity, it's somehow a threat to the chance of building a movement that is multiracial. Can you explain what you are exploring there?
Well, I think we have to be mindful that in order to build the kind of multiracial democracy that we so desperately deserve, we have to be able to build strong, effective multiracial movements. And too often, those movements are seen kind of like college brochures. You think you have to have one person from each group, and that as long as you have representation, then that actually solves the problems. But what we know is that there is a deep need for connection amongst communities who have been left out and left behind, and frankly, who have been told stories about each other that keep us from coming together. And so in the book, what I say is, it is also important, if we are going to build multiracial movements, that Black communities can get organized. And one is not a threat to the other. But it's also important that bringing people together of different backgrounds, that we start to understand the stories that hold us apart. And in the book, I talk about what happens when we engage in shallow multiracialism, which essentially leads to not having the deep relationships we need to be able to withstand the pressures of what happens when people try to pull us apart. And so this book is in favor of multiracial movements for a multiracial democracy. And it's asking us to do a little bit better in terms of the depth of the relationships that exist between us.
So, Alicia, since the hashtag took off, as you're aware, a sort of counter hashtag to Black Lives Matter sprouted up, which is All Lives Matter. Can you explain plainly what Black Lives Matter actually means and why it isn't discounting anyone else's experiences?
Yeah, Black Lives Matter isn't confusing. It's a very simple sentence, 3 words that says it all. I think what we're dealing with, though, is that a lot of people in this country have a hard time grappling with what racism looks like. And too often we see race as an issue of good people or bad people, as opposed to rules and policies and practices that leave some people out and leave others behind on the basis of how we look, things that we cannot actually control. And for me, when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying anybody else's life doesn't matter. We're saying that Black lives right now don't matter in this society and that they need to. And for all lives to matter, Black lives have to matter. We've said that many, many times. So this book is all about how we make that happen in practice and how to better understand what the theories are and also the practices behind the movement that literally talks about how we restore dignity to Black communities so that we can restore the promise of America.
Mm-hmm. And yet it's so interesting that some people appear to be threatened by this. Just last month, President Trump condemned the Black Lives Matter movement while addressing the Black community at an event in Atlanta. Let's listen to what he said.
Many of those who are spreading violence in our cities are supporters of an organization called the Black Lives Matter, or BLM. It's really hurting the Black community. It's hurting the Black community. This is the extreme socialist left, but beyond that, in my opinion. That's why the founders of the organization call themselves trained Marxists.
So what is your response to what you just heard there?
Well, I don't think our communities are confused. President Trump traffics in lies, misinformation, and disinformation every day. And if it wasn't so serious, it would be funny. When I say it's serious, what I mean is activists like myself and others are receiving death threats because of the tone and tenor of the person who is supposed to be leading this country and bringing us together again. Luckily, in November, we have an opportunity to oust him from this position that he is completely unfit for. And I will say this as well. Black Lives Matter has always been about restoring dignity to Black life. And for too long, and I talk about this in my book, stories about Black Lives Matter have been told about us, without us. And this book is really an opportunity for you to get a bird's eye view from one of the people who helped to create it about what we really believe and what we really do.
And Alicia, you have such a lovely cover for your new book. It's sort of full of life and exuberance. Can you explain the significance of it?
I love this cover so much. This is a photo of a little Black girl who is jumping and trying to reach the sky. You can see the flag right in front of her. And I think that this cover really represents the struggle of Black communities all over this country. Our fight to reach the sky, to reach the highest vision of who we can be together, and also to reach the promise of democracy that has been denied our communities for so long. So I hope that folks take this book as a toolkit and a little bit of a compass on how we get there.
All right, well, Alicia Garza, author of The Purpose of Power, How We Come Together When We Fall Apart. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on your book.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.